2025 Canadian Grand Prix race notes. Dick's race notes.
Well, hey, everybody. Just wanted to share my race notes with you about the Canadian Grand Prix that was held yesterday. Thought it was a really interesting race. The tire strategies were maybe what stood out most to me, although there were some other, certainly some other interesting activities going on track. I thought it was really interesting how some of the drivers like Sainz and Ocon were able to really go a long way on the hard tires, which really the hard tires that were marked for hard for this race were really a medium compound tire. And so the teams really had sort of like the choice of hard, medium, and soft, but it was really more like hard, soft, and even softer. So I thought that was pretty interesting how they were swapping tires out. Obviously, I don't think anybody went to the softs for any of the long runs. They may have done something there towards the end of the race, but of course, some of the big drama of the race occurred right at the very end when Norris dove for a spot that he thought was open on the track, and which everybody else thought was not. So, with predictable results, I hated to see that for Lando. He had driven really a heck of a race. Again, not such a good qualifying session, but clearly had the car to pass Piastri. My guess is that his tires were maybe just a little bit better, but he was also, I think, feeling the heat of the need to get in front of his teammate and maybe to prove a point. And of course, it all came to tears for Lando. And of course, then that precipitated the race finishing under the yellow flag, which I hate that. I want to see them race to the end. But that said, it was a very well-driven, well-judged race by George Russell. Of course, I thought the fact that Kimi Antonelli got his first podium in a full-on Grand Prix was amazing, and I was really thrilled for him. I kind of got the feeling that everybody is out not so much gunning for the McLarens at this race, but they were actually gunning for Max. It was kind of interesting. I mean, McLaren's got the best car, but maybe it wasn't the best car for Canada. I'm not really sure what the deal was, but they seemed to be missing just a little bit. Whereas with Russell, that Mercedes came to life, and, Antonelli as well. And as Russell said after the race, hey, the cooler conditions really suit this car. And so, I don't know, what a European calls cool versus what a Texan calls cool, probably two different things. But in fact, I'm almost sure it's two different things. But still, I thought it was really, really interesting that he made that comment, because that's what last year's Mercedes also had, going for it or going against it, as the case may be, is that it seems to work better in the cooler conditions. And so George used that to good effect. And so I thought it was really good to watch that. I thought that we saw maybe the first time with Colapinto in the Alpine. It seemed like he was driving much better. He finished a couple spots ahead of Gasly, although both of the cars were out of the points. So not really a whole lot to say there, but it seemed interesting to me that he just seemed to be driving with more aggression. I'd be interested to hear if anybody else saw that as well. Williams had an uncharacteristically tough weekend. Not really sure what's going on there, but that was certainly a surprise to me, because I really thought that this would be a track where Williams would go really well, and they struggled the whole weekend. And of course, Albon retired with engine troubles, so that was adding insult to injury, in my opinion. But and then last but not least, I think the things that I'm kind of noodling on, well, actually not last, but not the last item, but one thing that I thought was really interesting is that Hamilton had another difficult race, but it turns out that like early in the race, he hit a badger on the track and messed up his aerodynamics and all that, and really messed up the badger's day, I'm sure. But anyway, man, that's a weird way to have some bad luck thrown at you. I mean, I always talk about the cartoon anvil dropping out of the sky. Lewis got the cartoon anvil pretty much. It came in the form of a badger, but still, it was really unique. It's not the only time I've heard of such a thing like that happening, but that's pretty unique. Aston Martin looked pretty good in the hands of Fernando Alonso. It didn't look so good in the hands of Lance Stroll. I don't know what's going on with Lance, whether his wrist is still really affecting him after the surgery. And, maybe if he gets another couple of weeks off, he had surgery in between Spain and Canada, came back. Maybe he came back a little bit too soon. I'm not really sure. But, he's got 2 weeks to get that wrist healed back up, and hopefully we'll see some much more competitive form for him in Austria. I kind of wonder, though, if maybe we're starting to see the end of Lance. I don't know. He's like the last 22 races, he's been out-qualified by Fernando, I think, something like that. And while he did score some useful points at the beginning of the year, it was always when Fernando had other issues that happened, brake discs catching on fire in China and stuff like that. So I don't know. It'll be really interesting to see whether Lance is around or if he just retires mid-season and somebody else steps into the car, which would be interesting. I'm not making any calls one way or the other, but it certainly seems strange that he's still really struggling. And I've got to believe that wrist is still bothering him. On the other hand, maybe he's just kind of worn out from Formula One. It's happened before. So maybe that's the deal. Anyway, thought it was really an interesting race. Really happy for George and Kimi. I thought Max drove a good race. He seemed to indicate that second place was about as good as it was going to get for them. He definitely scored some useful points over Piastri. So this drivers' championship is certainly not over yet. That's for sure. Austria is 2 weeks away. That historically has been a McLaren circuit. I would suspect that's what we're going to see again this year. But you never know. That's why we run the races, right? So we will talk in 2 weeks. I think Austria is followed by Silverstone. It's going to be 2 very, very interesting races. Thanks for listening in.
Sabrina's race notes. Thanks, Dick. Here are my thoughts. Number 1, George and Max. George and Max are playing mind games with one another, not just at this Grand Prix, but since the last race and in the days leading up to the Canadian race. Comments over the weekend were getting under Max's skin, and Red Bull had already laid out the groundwork to prepare for anything by alerting race officials. George was goading, and we all saw it. The safety car affair was inevitable, as was Red Bull's protest and the steward's rejection. Right now, Max and George are essentially competing for P3 in the Drivers' Championship. So if we zoom out, it's interesting to consider that George is in the midst of contract negotiations and Max hasn't been pleased with his car, not to mention the looming sword of Damocles of a race ban through Austria. Each of them has to be looking to where he wants to be in 2026. Which team will be positioned technically to give him the best car? Which team can he rely upon to meet his needs, have his back in the cutthroat world of F1? Red Bull stepping up and protesting and protecting their driver seems to be a way to reassure Max as much as it is to protect themselves as an organization, considering all the internal drama the media brings forward each week. George pulling out this win reinforces from his perspective that he is and should remain Mercedes' lead driver as they turn the page to 2026. When you listen to the team radio and watch the driver cameras, it seems to me that the safety car was driving inconsistently. Both Max and George were attempting to keep the proper distance. Number 2, Kimi's podium. Kimi is the first rookie of the season on the podium. He took the opening Oscar left for him in the opening lap to position himself well, and throughout the race he put pressure on Max. Overall, he played the team game well. Number 3, Mercedes 1 and 3. With the increased temperatures, I didn't expect Mercedes to produce a great result since they seem to do better in cooler temperatures. George got a great start and managed his race very well, and then, of course, Kimi. Nice to see them sitting in P2 for the Constructors' Championship. Number 4, Oscar and Lando clash. Lando made too many mistakes during this race, most notably the clash, which resulted in his DNF. Ultimately, he took too long to overtake Oscar, which then led to him feeling a little panicky and attempting the move that he did. Number 5, Ferrari. When broadcast cut to the Ferrari team radio, most notably the Leclerc Plan B, Plan C moment, I thought maybe things were improved and all the recent media discussions about Ferrari and Vasseur were not relevant. But then they brought Charles into the pits. I scratched my head and thought along with Charles, what is going on? Charles is managing Deg on those tires and in a good position on track. It confused me on why lap 29, despite him saying he was good, the team brought him in and committed him to a 2-stop strategy. I thought this kind of bad communication with the team had gone away last year, but then we've noticed it more on Lewis's side of the garage. I chalked it up to growing pains and getting to know each other. But watching this race, I'm wondering if the Ferrari culture has regressed or if internal political infighting is causing the current dysfunction. Unclear communications do not instill trust. In a sport where communication and trust between driver and team are vital, drivers need to feel confident in team calls because they can't see the whole picture. This kind of call did not make sense when you zoomed out and looked at the race. Number 6, Nico and Alonso in the points. Both Nico and Alonso put in solid drives and brought much needed points for their teams. I'm hoping that it's a combination of the tracks that suit their respective cars, upgrades, and setup decisions which allowed these two drivers to truly maximize their skills. It was also nice to think that these two Le Mans winners gained points on the Le Mans weekend. Number 7, Ocon. Esteban brought forth a good performance for Haas, 58 laps on the hard, helping his team score much-needed points. Number 8, Williams' struggle. Carlos wrestled for that final points position in the top 10. This wasn't an easy race by any means for Williams. Could it be the technical directive implemented in Imola is impacting Williams more than we may realize? Also, Valve has stated that they are more focused on 26. It makes me wonder if they were not really expecting much for this race. Carlos being impeding during quali didn't help, and clearly Alex was frustrated by his starting position, not to mention his clash with Colapinto. I feel for the team, but that's because my expectations this season are higher than ever in recent years. Not making excuses, but just trying to remember this is a historic team that's seeking to come back like a phoenix with the deck stacked against them. I hope they can keep their cool and work through these next races to get the right data and continue the proper team culture. Number 9, Alpine. Alpine is at the bottom of the team standings and failing to score points. I feel for the Enstone team. And number 10, Lewis and the Groundhog. Despite hitting a groundhog and incurring damage, Lewis was able to end the race in P6. He had been close behind Oscar for much of the first stint. I feel for him. Wanting to do better but not succeeding has to be super frustrating for him.